For a long time, I didn't know when to call something an asset. I would say I was building assets, but if I'm honest, what I was really building were income mechanisms that still depended heavily on me. They worked. They generated revenue. They felt productive, but they didn't feel stable. The shift from mechanism to asset is subtle. There isn't a ceremony. There isn't a dramatic jump in numbers. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small signals. And the first time I noticed those signals in my own income system, I almost missed them. One of the earliest signs was this: I stopped feeling like every single day determined survival. That might sound small, but if you've ever built income from scratch, you know that early on, every day feels decisive. If you don't push, nothing moves. If you don't show up, nothing converts. If you take your foot off the gas, income drops. That's normal in the beginning. But at some point, something changes. You take a slower day and income still shows up. You reduce visibility and demand doesn't vanish. You miss a push cycle and conversions don't collapse. And that's when you realize something important. The first sign a system is becoming an asset is when income stops reacting dramatically to your daily effort. Early-stage income is reactive. It's tightly coupled to your output. When you work more, it grows. When you work less, it shrinks. Asset-like income behaves differently. It absorbs fluctuations. I remember the first time I had a lower energy week and expected numbers to dip sharply. They didn't spike, but they didn't crash either. That steadiness told me structure had begun carrying weight. Not all of it, but enough. Another early sign was psychological. I stopped refreshing dashboards constantly. That sounds almost trivial, but it wasn't. When income depends entirely on your activity, you monitor obsessively. You check because you feel responsible for every swing. But when structure strengthens, you don't feel the same urgency. You still care. You still optimize. But you're not bracing for collapse. When you stop feeling like income could vanish overnight, you're moving from effort to asset. That feeling doesn't come from hope. It comes from reinforcement. Reinforcement in clarity. Reinforcement in positioning. Reinforcement in pathways that don't require constant supervision. I also noticed conversations changing. Early on, every sale required heavy persuasion. Every decision needed explanation. Every objection required personal handling. As structure matured, buyers began arriving more aligned. They understood the offer faster. They required less convincing. They moved forward with less friction. That wasn't luck. That was architecture doing its job. When positioning filters effectively, your effort decreases without income decreasing. That's another sign. When effort reduces, but income doesn't fall proportionally, structure is replacing manual force. Manual force is loud. It feels powerful. It gives you the illusion of control. But assets are quieter. Assets don't require dramatic intervention. They continue influencing outcomes even when you're not actively pushing them. There's also a shift in how income behaves during disruption. In earlier stages, a missed campaign or reduced activity window could create noticeable volatility. A small interruption had outsized consequences. As the system matured, interruptions didn't create the same instability. Income dipped slightly, maybe, but it didn't collapse. That resilience is a signal. Assets absorb shocks better than mechanisms. Mechanisms require continuous input. Assets retain stored effort. That's what makes them different. I started seeing that what I once called momentum wasn't leverage at all. It was just consistent force. Momentum disappears when force disappears. Leverage persists. The moment your income continues because of what you built earlier, not what you're doing today, you're touching asset territory. That moment isn't dramatic. It's almost underwhelming. You just notice that things don't fall apart as easily. There's also a time-based shift. In earlier phases, income always felt short-term. You thought in days, in weeks, in immediate cycles. As systems matured, I began thinking in quarters, in years. Decisions weren't about surviving this week. They were about strengthening structure for long-term durability. That longer horizon is another signal. Assets change how you think. You don't treat them like daily performance metrics. You treat them like structures to reinforce. Another sign is optionality. When income depends entirely on your presence, you feel trapped in it. You can't pivot easily. You can't experiment without fear. Every adjustment feels risky. As systems become assets, optionality increases. You can test new positioning without destabilizing everything. You can explore adjacent ideas without income evaporating. You can refine without panic. Optionality is leverage in disguise. Because when you're not operating from survival, you make better decisions. And better decisions reinforce the asset further. I also noticed something subtle about emotional energy. When income is purely effort-driven, exhaustion directly affects results. If you're tired, numbers drop. If you're distracted, performance suffers. As structure strengthens, your personal energy becomes less volatile in its impact. You still matter, but you're not the single point of stability. That's a huge difference. It's the difference between being the engine and being the architect. The engine must run constantly. The architect strengthens structure so it runs without constant supervision. When your role shifts from pushing income to strengthening income, you're building assets. That shift doesn't eliminate work. It changes the nature of it. You spend less time persuading and more time refining. Less time reacting and more time reinforcing. Less time generating motion and more time designing durability. And durability compounds. Over time, those early signals become more pronounced. Income fluctuates less dramatically. Demand becomes more predictable. Your nervous system relaxes slightly because the system isn't fragile. That's when you realize you're not just earning anymore. You're constructing, and construction behaves differently from performance. Performance requires presence every time. Construction holds after it's built. The first signs of asset behavior aren't explosive growth. They're stability, resilience, alignment, and reduced reactivity. They're subtle. But if you pay attention, they're unmistakable. And once you notice them, you start building intentionally toward them. Because you realize the goal was never just income. It was income that outlives the day's effort. That's what makes something an asset. And the moment you see those first signs, you stop chasing noise. You start reinforcing structure.